Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Griffin, we hear over and over again about a need for constancy of purpose at NASA and the detrimental impacts of shifting priorities, organizational conflicts, mixed signals from Congress, and I could go on and on. How much of this lack of purpose do you think can be changed through a reorganization such as the one outlined in the Space Leadership Preservation Act?
Well, sir, as we talked earlier, I think the Space Leadership Preservation Act might be one tool to achieve that constancy of purpose, but it's just a tool. If the Congress at large can codify into law a space policy for the United States that its citizens support and the space community supports, and that we want to do as a society, that is the crucial step.
So you're saying we've got to work through the ideological differences and as Congress.
Yes, sir. And I will remind you, if that sounds a hopeless task, I was here.
Well, if it were up to my colleague from Colorado and me, we could work this out fairly quickly.
But we did this in 2003 and 4, following the loss of Columbia, and for a 2-year period, there were I myself participated in 4 hearings in both House and Senate, along with many, many other people, and these things were thrashed out, and we emerged from that period with a good plan.
I come from an engineering background, and I believe the space program is fundamentally more engineering than science. Obviously, there's science, and in engineering, I think anyone who's been involved in that field understands that you have to have clearly defined objectives. Otherwise, you'll never build to design. And you will spend an enormous amount of money and get nothing. And so I do think we've got to have a vision that we can design to, which I guess, does the lack of continuity at NASA affect some programs more intensely than it does others?
I couldn't agree more with your comments, sir. I could not agree more. And the longer term and larger the project is, the more that lack of consistency of purpose affects it. If I have a discovery program, a small satellite mission program to another planet that costs $500 million and can be done in 3 or 4 or 5 years, then no, such a program would not be much affected. If we're talking about recreating a new heavy lift launch vehicle, as we are with the Space Launch System that Colonel Collins mentioned earlier today, well, that is a multi-year proposition and a multi-billion-dollar proposition, and it needs to be sustained or not done at all.
I've actually visited the facility where that work is being done, and it needs to be completed because there's not a whole lot of use for it if we don't. And I think many of my colleagues here would agree with this, that we do need to allow NASA to define the vision with our oversight, but get behind it. And otherwise, we're going to continue to waste an enormous amount of money. Dr. Griffin, I'll ask you this question. There's an op-ed in Space News. Mary Lynn Dittmer of the Coalition for Deep Space Exploration touts the flexibility of the Space Launch System, which was just mentioned, which will be capable of launching a wide array of missions. Given the lack of continuity, how important is it for NASA systems to be adaptable to changing priorities?
Well, it would be nice to say that NASA's systems and programs could be easily adapted to changing priorities. I don't think it's very realistic. It's one of those things that everyone would like, but is pretty hard to do. When it takes 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years to accomplish a great thing, if the priorities change in the meantime, you know, you're left hanging. And
that's where you run into all of the change orders and the run-up in cost, and then everybody's frustrated.
Exactly, sir. It costs more money, and you don't get the product out in the end. I thought Mary Lynn's op-ed was very well done. She's far more articulate than I am, and I was glad to see such an op-ed in Space News.
Well, I had to go to another hearing earlier, but when while I was here, I heard you talk about the overall vision for space and what it means for us, and Colonel Collins commented on this as well. And that was an inspired, in my opinion, is an inspired view of America's role in space. And I commend you for it. My time has expired, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.